Grant Cameron is the premier researcher, I feel, in this field of disclosure. He has presidentialufo.com website. He's followed the last, I guess, 7 presidents since 1947 about their interactions with the whole UFO topic. But he's been following closely since December 16th, 2017, but before that. But he's the one for me who has all the moving parts in order. And this is such a complex issue with the people coming out for disclosure, people coming out within the government against it, and this part in between that he talks about. And we're going to get a really nice overview of where we are to date, and then on Saturday we'll take it even further. So Grant, I've tried to listen to every single word you said in the last few months about what's going on, and the only thing I have, and maybe you'll address it, is that in the New York Times article, Luis Elizondo said he was having conflict in the Pentagon when he wanted to come out with this disclosure, and I was wondering if that played into where Pandolfi was trying to exert his power. Was that the conflict? But maybe you'll get into this. So Grant, take it away and just give us all you got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll start my share screen here. I have a PowerPoint. Okay, and we'll address a lot of people think that this story is sort of dying out. Nothing could be further from the truth. I have to apologize. I've been fighting the flu all week, and I still have no energy, whatever. So this is moving very fast. There's a lot of email. Just in the last couple of days, I haven't answered in terms of this thing. But I'll give you as much as I've got, and I'll do the second part on Saturday. And hopefully by Saturday, I can go through some of these latest things, because there's some events that are about to happen, and go through that. But this just gives you an update. I've been following this story for a couple of years. I've known this was sort of coming for a couple of years. And it is a story that is good and bad. It's a story where it's like being in a James Bond movie. I just sent an email to a top reporter saying, and she was giving me some material, and I said, isn't this just like a James Bond movie? And it is like that, but it's also a story that I'm absolutely getting very tired of, because I'm sort of in a situation where I have about 80 some people that I'm watching. There's a lot of people in this story. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are making comment about it. And what I basically do is I just sit there and watch all these people. And there's maybe 35 of them. I really don't know. It's just part of a group that's called the Cosmic Club. But I watch all these people, and it's been very, very active. And I've been, for years, trying to get out of this disclosure story, because I think there's, to me, is aspects that I'd rather do. But the way I've sort of given the analogy, this is sort of like a bad marriage or like a drinking problem. I'll just do this one more day and then I'll get out of this thing. But it's actually picking up speed. I mean, it's people think there's nothing going on, but it's actually exactly the opposite. Some of the stories that I'm trying to do that while this is going on, this is a story that I'm putting on my White House UFO YouTube channel that I think is kind of an important story that is not really given that much attention. It is part of the Tom Delonge story, and this is the story about consciousness. And I'm going to put out a story with these two witnesses. I interviewed them about some new technology that's come out. The one on the left is Steve Boucher, who's a musician in Canada, whose entire band was abducted in 1972. And the woman on the right is Suzanne Hansen from New Zealand, who I say is one of the most important people that we should be watching. And I'm looking at the consciousness aspect of this whole thing, and both of them described a technology that has now been made public. And this is one of these, oh wow moments when I saw this. I could not believe that these people had, because I'd interviewed them before, I've got them on my YouTube channel, and when I saw this technology, I just couldn't believe that these people had described it. Steve Boucher described this technology in 1972. This is a technology that's come out where we're now able to use a machine to look at blood vessels, and you can actually show the blood vessels in the arm, and both these described in great detail the fact that they had seen this technology when they're on board the ship, and that the technology is even more complex. It's got to do, they can actually show you all your muscles, all your bones, and they can use this instrument to go and look inside your body and stuff like that. So I've interviewed both of them. I'm going to put that up. And this is the book that Susie Hansen has written, which I say is critically important. She is actually going to be at the UFO Congress next month in Phoenix, and she's going to talk about this technology and a lot of other technology that she has seen. And I think she is one of the best stories. Very clear recollection, a lot of material, a lot of detailed material. And so this is one of the stories I'm putting up, I'm trying to get away with. The woman that was with her is a girl who's helping me, Desta Barnaby, who's helping me. She's sort of like what they refer to as a sort of an antenna. And this is, if you look at the Tom DeLonge thing, one of the stories that people really haven't seen much about is the fact that they are actually working with experiencers. And this is a group, Kit Green, Gary Nolan, and Hal Puthoff are working with experiencers. And what they're looking at is experiencers who've had injuries, who have interacted with the craft, and also people who are highly psychic. And they actually refer at one point during the research, and this research hasn't been really put out except indirectly to some researchers, that all these people have a common thing called an antenna, a brain pattern that they're referring to as the antenna. Desta, I figure, is an antenna. She's written a book, a channeling book that I encouraged her to write after I saw some of the material she was coming up with. And she's one of the people that's helping me put this DeLonge story together. But she's also helping with other stuff. And there's just so many stories to do that there just isn't enough time in a day to do this kind of stuff. And the other thing that I'm putting up, I'm going to do 6 interviews, which again ties into the Tom DeLonge thing, that I say the key element. Everybody's into the hardware, into the free energy, into is there really aliens here, all this kind of stuff. I'm more interested in the consciousness aspect. And if you recall back, if you've heard all the interviews that Tom DeLonge did, Tom DeLonge talks about the fact that when he was at Skunk Works, when this thing first started, when he was invited to this barbecue and then was invited to Lockheed, he went in there and he was talking to them about UFOs. They said, yeah, they exist, so what, big deal? And the guy said, I just want to know, how do they get here? How does it operate? How do they get here? And it was at that point that Tom DeLonge brought up the idea of consciousness. And he said that when he brought up the word consciousness, that's all the head scientist at Skunk Works wanted to talk about, was consciousness. So one of the other things I'm going to do, and this is related to the Tom DeLonge thing, I'm going to release 6 interviews. I've done most of them already. They've got on my YouTube channel, of people who have flown the craft. And Susie Hansen is one of those people, and these people describe in great detail how it's done. And what you will see, that it involves consciousness. This is the key element of this whole thing. And I think it's the key element of the whole UFO subject. But these are kind of the stories I'm trying to get away with, but I keep getting dragged back into the sort of the Tom DeLonge Pentagon story. So let's go to that. Another thing I'm going to release, Desta had gone on a secret mission to Phoenix. I don't really know what she was doing. She was working with Paula Harris on something. And I guess they didn't tell me because they knew I'd tell everybody. But I heard she was going there, so I said, go to the Hayden Library at the University of Arizona. And that's where all the files are for Barry Goldwater's files. And Desta and I are going to co-author a book. We've got all the files. There's a tremendous amount of material, Goldwater files on UFOs. So we're going to release that. And I think that's kind of important. So she was down there working on this kind of stuff. And the University of Arizona is kind of interesting as well, because it also ties into Bob Bigelow, who is the key to this whole Tom DeLonge story. If you want to know the Tom DeLonge story, you have to know how Bob Bigelow fits into the story. He is the center of the entire story. All the rest of it is sort of just on the edges. It's all feeding into Bob Bigelow. And Bob Bigelow actually went to the University of Arizona. And he also financed, a lot of people know that he did a lot of UFO work. And I've mentioned this before. Most people sort of forget the fact that Bob Bigelow put millions of dollars into a chair at the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, on consciousness studies. So he knows the connection. He knows that consciousness is a key part of this thing. And on Saturday, I'm going to get more into the Bob Bigelow thing. I have, thanks to a friend of mine, Giuliano, who is just an absolute resource for anything video and audio. And he's in Europe. He's a reporter or a broadcaster in Europe. And he gave me access to all the Bob Bigelow interviews from the last 15 years or 12 years. And I've listened to some of them. I've been sick this week, so I haven't listened to a couple of them. But Bob Bigelow's been talking about this thing. And when you go back and listen to these interviews, you go, oh, that's what he's talking about. And so I'll do a little bit of this on Saturday, Bob Bigelow's connection to this, which is extremely important. Now, this is my main slide that I bring up almost every time I do an update, and I try to get it across to people. And I don't think people are really catching on, but I'll bring it up again. What is going on here is not disclosure. The government is not disclosing. And when I talk on Saturday about Bob Bigelow clearly in 2013 in an interview, he's asked, and he talks about this at length. This is not what they're doing. What they are doing is confirmation. Bob Bigelow does not believe in disclosure. He believes in confirmation. And what he says is that we are going to, we have to confirm the fact that UFOs are real, that we are being visited, that people aren't crazy, that this phenomenon is real. And disclosure will come a couple of years down the road. The first thing we're going to do is to do this confirmation thing. So that's what's going on. People think there's disclosure going on. If there was disclosure, the Pentagon would have come out and made an announcement, released all the films, released all the data, released all the files, released all the medals. They have not done that. They are not disclosing. People have to go, because people keep thinking, when are they going to disclose? This is way down the road. What is happening with this Tom DeLonge Pentagon thing and with Pandolfi is they are doing this acclimatization thing. This is a gradual release. It's a controlled release. And I wrote about it in my book, Managing Magic, which I'll show you in a second. And I've written a couple of books. I've written about this for 20 years, that this is what they're doing, and they've been doing it over and over again. So the Tom DeLonge operation is just the latest version of this story. It has happened many times before. And the government is not covering up. They're not, if they're covering up, they would just shut up. As I'll describe on Saturday, I will give you the Canadian government take on this Tom DeLonge thing, what the Canadian government reacted to this. So what's happening here, and this you have to, I'll keep referring to this slide as I go through my lecture. What is happening is something in between. They're not disclosing, they're not covering up, they're doing something in between, which is a slow release of the fact. They're getting people ready for this whole thing. So where they are right now is they're saying, we got these objects, we don't know what they are, we're not really sure, but it's for real. Garbage. They know a lot more what they're saying. All they're doing is they're taking the first step. They're getting the public ready, and it has worked to a great degree. The articles that have come out have made, I think, a lot of people in America suddenly take notice that this story is for real. This is not a crackpot issue anymore. A lot of people who are skeptic now are saying, well, maybe there's something to this. So this is what the first stage of this thing. Now, as I said, I wrote this in Managing Magic. This happened with Bill Moore. This happened with the UFO Cover-Up Live in 1988, and it's happening again. And as I'll describe, I'm dealing with Eric Davis, who's the chief scientist for Hal Puthoff, and he stated to me that he believes this is the second disclosure. This is the second effort. The first one took place in 1973, 74, 75, with a guy by the name of Bob Emenegger, who's a good friend of mine, and had to do with the Holloman Air Force Base video, and it had to do with a book and a documentary that he did called UFOs Past, Present, and Future. It's exactly the same thing. They said his impression was that was the first effort to get this stuff out. This is the second effort to get this stuff out. And I'll talk a bit more about the Bob Emenegger thing and how it ties into this, how it's exactly the same pattern. All they're doing is doing the same thing with different players. This is to show you that a lot of this stuff, people are thinking this thing is slowing down. I actually was dealing with some emails and some postings that were done at Open Minds Forum today, following a news story talking about a meeting taking place next week. And I think I've mentioned this in past updates. This is about my 5th or 6th update since October the 11th that I've done on this Tom Delonge thing. And in all of them, I've sort of had the feeling that there are no two sides. Everybody's in the same room, and everybody thinks there's all these sides, and that they're all competing with each other. They're all fighting. There's all these different people fighting with each other, and actually, it's just one big operation being run and authorized by the President of the United States. And one of the postings that was on there today talked about this meeting and how they were going to take over disclosure next week at this meeting that's going to take place, and it ended with a very sort of authoritative want to bet, and they're very sure. So this is some of the stuff that I haven't really had time to sort through, but there's a lot of stuff going on in behind the scenes, various players moving around, various meetings taking place, and there's been probably 5 or 6 meetings where when I saw 2 people were meeting, I was going, those people are on opposite teams. Like, what are they doing? And the more I look at it, I'm not sure yet, but the more I look at it, the more I think it's all the same thing. It's all the same operation. That it's one operation, and from making it look like there's 2 different operations going on. Now, one thing I want to point out with this Tom Delonge thing, and because everybody always goes back to the New York Times article, New York Times article, New York Times article, and what people have to realize, this was carefully orchestrated, that this was something that was done in 3 different newspapers at the same time. It wasn't just the New York Times. It was also the New York Times ran the 2 stories, but the Politico ran a story, and the Washington Post ran a story as well on the same day, which shows that this was very carefully planned behind the scenes, that all these 3 major outlets all went with the story the same day. That was not coincidence. So the people that are behind this very carefully planned this. And another thing I'd like to point out at this point is people, I'm sort of in the middle of this thing now between all these different people, and I'm sort of, you know, getting a lot of static from people. You know, I had the sort of people telling me that, you know, I was the only defender of Tom Delonge, and if I would stop defending the guy, his whole operation would fall apart. And now I'm getting the thing like I'm attacking Tom Delonge. And so my position is this. I have these 80 sort of people that I watch. I don't really interact with many of them. I just watch what they're saying. I sort of put the pieces together, and I don't belong to anybody's church. I don't belong to anybody's group. I don't carry anybody's flag. I just want to put out what I think is the truth based upon all the stuff that these people are saying. And some of the stuff I may say may be stuff that people are feeding me that's wrong or whatever, but basically there has to be an outlet for people, because there's a lot of games playing. This is U.S. intelligence. This is U.S. counterintelligence that is involved in this whole thing, and it's a game that you have to spend a lot of time. It's not a simple story. As I said in my opening slide, they are not disclosing. This is a sort of a side thing that they want to put out. So this is not a disclosure. This is some sort of operation that they're running, which is carefully orchestrated, and there are no bad guys. I do not believe there are any bad guys. I think all the people that are in behind the scenes in all these different teams are doing the best they can to get this thing out. I do not believe there's people who are trying to shaft the system. And I know there's a lot of people who believe that. I simply do not believe that. Now, here's where I want to make a point as well on where my position on this whole thing is. And this has to do, and I may have mentioned this in a past lecture, this may shock some people. I had my first encounter with UFOs in 1975. The first 2 times I went out, I had close up. This was not, no voices, no aliens, nothing like that, but I was pretty close to these objects the first 2 nights. And I tried to publish a book. I made this public numerous times. Nobody wanted to publish the book. The local publisher said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among non-believers. And at that point, I said, this is a total waste of time. And all I'm interested in now is somebody must know what I saw. Somebody must have the answer to what it was. And that's why I just sit there and listen to people. I find the highest authority that I can find who is talking about this, who is interested in this subject, and I listen carefully to what they're saying. And so it comes down to this disclosure thing. Now, Ron Pandolfi's wife is Aliha Pandolfi, and if you've ever interacted with her or been on her go-to meeting or heard her, she always asks people, why do you want disclosure? And so I'll answer the question tonight. I could care less about disclosure. I have no interest in disclosure, and that may shock some people, because what I think is happening is people think disclosure is something that's going to change their life. And basically, the way I look at life is that you're being dealt a bunch of cards. And if you're familiar with near-death experiences or with the psilocybin experiments done at Johns Hopkins University, where these people have these experiences where they see their life flash before them and they get a review of their life, none of this stuff's going to come up. You're not going to have disclosure at the end of your life. It's not going to be something that affected your life. This is just a card that's being played. And people have the impression that we're being influenced by things around us. And that when we get disclosure, then I get off my fat ass and I'll do something. And basically, it really doesn't matter whether there's disclosure or there's not disclosure. Basically, what you and I have to do is just simply do what we have to do in terms of what we think we came onto this world to do. So I really don't have that much interest in disclosure. I have a great interest in trying to figure out what's going on. So that's sort of where I'm coming from, and it may not be something that people like, but that's basically the way it is. So again, it's this, you know, the disclosure, the cover up, something in between, and I'm basically trying to figure out what's actually going on. I talk about, and a lot of people have gotten upset because I've sort of questioned some of the stuff that has come out. What you have to remember in this story with Tom Delonge is that I call it the high hurdle. That we can talk about UFOs, we can talk about the Holloman Air Force Base film, that there was this incident, that there was this Nimitz incident or whatever, and that's fine. You can sort of put that stuff out, and you can talk about it. It's a whole different thing to try to convince people with actual evidence. So when it comes time to release the film, when it comes time to release the documents, when it comes time to release the hardware, then you have the high hurdle. Is how do you get this thing out? How do you get the material into the public without violating security clearances, where everything's going to suddenly slide out of control? And that's why I say this operation doesn't seem to be any different than any other operation, because they're talking about a story, and then when you start looking at the material they're bringing out, it all starts to fall apart. It's the same sort of scenario, is that you have this high hurdle that it's always going to be a problem. And the prime example was asked was, how did Elizondo get the videos out of the Pentagon? He doesn't own the videos. He doesn't control the videos. This would be sort of top secret, classified material that shouldn't be released. And how do you get it out? Because once you release a video that actually confirms that this thing's for real, and you confirm it from the government, then it's all over. And so what's happening is people are thinking, well, they're releasing this video, but if they really wanted to cleanly release it, to disclose it, to put this Secretary of Defense, why are you doing this sort of backdoor thing where you're bringing some guy who quits and then he comes out, and then you have a couple of videos leak out, and they're going to another couple of videos, and then you got 6 books you got to read, and it's this same dribble, slow disclosure thing that's going on. So this is the thing that I think you'll have to remember. There's 3. I always thought there was 3 different disclosures going on, and I'm starting to think now it may all be the same thing. Just to make a point on the Condign report, you may have seen some reports from Great Britain that all the files from Condign have been released. John Burroughs, who's the expert on this thing, has confirmed. I asked him, and he said, no, there's 3 key reports, or 3 key things that have not been released yet. And then we have the second one is the Pandolfi, the documentary thing. And just in the last week, I started asking, is there a script? Is there actually this thing? And people started indicating, no, there's no script. And I started to think, well, maybe there wasn't this documentary, and this all has to do with portals, which is extremely important. It's not the nuts and bolts Tom DeLonge thing where we're going to have, you know, crafts and we're going to have all this kind of stuff. This goes to the whole idea that we have interdimensional, that they're getting here not by flying big, huge ships. And then, of course, the third is the Tom DeLonge thing, which I've spent, I guess, most of my time on. Most people think the story is stalled. The story is not stalled at all. They have stopped releasing videos, and I've heard from the same people that told me a year ago that high-level government officials would step out, they would identify themselves, and they would say this is for real, which is exactly what happened October the 11th during the Tom Delonge news conference. The same sources that were telling me that are telling me, no, this thing is just getting going. That there are some, maybe a video event that's going to take place. There's some more videos that are coming out. But again, it's this slow disclosure. This is this, you know, drip, drip, drip thing that's going on. And this is what the government's been doing for years. Now, the stuff, and I've reported this before, according to George Knapp, he said 38 reports, some of them hundreds of pages long, up to 490 pages. 36 technical reports at one time. I don't know if this is the same thing, but he mentioned 36 technical reports, 24 films, warehouse with material. And this is another thing that the material I talked about in one of my previous updates about some material that was recovered from a site in New Mexico where a government official took 2 academics, blindfolded them, took them to this site. That has now come up on Open Minds Forum. That they're now talking about this material, and again, this is one of these crossover things where this is clearly a Tom Delonge story, and you have the Pandolfi people now talking about this hardware material, that it will be at this meeting next week. Research with experiencers, as I said, this is probably the most important one to me, which people aren't really talking about, and then the UFO technology. And again, it comes down to this thing where nobody's really, most of the stuff has not come out. So if you wanted to disclose, if you wanted to do it, you would have dumped all this stuff onto the people all at one time. You just say, okay, here it is, it's for real. And what you see is all we have so far is two videos, and we have Eric Davis talking about a 2008 executive summary report where he went on with Linda Howe and John Burroughs, and he read some material from that report that he had been given authorization by Hal Puthoff to read. So we know this material, but again, it's not all coming out at once. This is not disclosure. This is acclimatization. This is confirmation. Lou Elizondo, this is kind of interesting, and I'm going to release some other items that I've just discovered related to this stuff. Lou Elizondo did an interview on W Radio Columbia where he has stated, because everybody hears the story, they say, okay, 2007 to 2012, this program was run, and then it was cut off. The money was cut off, and that was the end of the program. Lou Elizondo has stated on this radio show that there was new funding given in 2013 for the program. And he is, in other interviews, most people know that he has stated this program still continues. So the idea that there was just a program from with $22 million worth of black budget money that ended in 2012 is not correct. Lou Elizondo has confirmed that 2013 the program received new money. Now, he didn't say where it came from, but this shows you that there's lots of parts of the story that still have to come out. As the Nimitz story, and this is where I'm sort of being attacked because I have some questions with the videos that are out, and I'll explain why. I have no question about the Nimitz story, none. The Nimitz story did occur. There was objects over 2 weeks. There was all sorts of encounters. There was all sorts of documentation that was done of this whole thing. I'm not questioning the Nimitz story. The Nimitz story did happen. The same as I do believe there was a Holloman Air Force Base film. I'm not questioning that. It's when you get to actual data that backs it up. That's when everything starts to get a little bit shaky. We're not questioning the Nimitz story. One of the interesting things Eric Davis brought up about the Nimitz story was that it happened over the island, the Coronado Island, which is kind of interesting because in 10 years before the Nimitz story, in 1994, the Coronado, if you read Yvonne Smith's book, there was a huge abduction of a whole series of people at the Coronado Hotel. So this is just below where this Nimitz thing was supposed to have occurred. This is kind of interesting, may not mean anything. The New York Times story was leaked on, was published on the internet version, went out December 16th. The print version went out December 17th, and the print version in the New York Times. The interesting thing is that's a significant date. That is the date they shut Blue Book down. And sometimes you sort of see this, and it's just a pattern, maybe it doesn't exist, but I've always seen these patterns that they do these things just to sort of throw hints. And one of the ones was, if you remember the Corso story, most people may not realize that it happened on the 50th anniversary of Roswell. And the Chase Brandon story, where he stood up and said Roswell was real, it was extraterrestrial, and there were cadavers, happened on the 65th anniversary of Roswell. And it's almost like they do these things just on the anniversary, just to sort of throw this out, that dates are sort of important as to when you leak, when you're going to leak. The UFO film, now this is where we get into the sort of the problems of this whole thing. There are the two videos that have come out. And as I'll point out on Saturday, the one is not a Nimitz video. It's been confirmed as happening on the east coast of the United States by the Fravor, the commander, told the Boston Globe that the one it was happening on the east coast. So they are not both Nimitz videos. The one is, and here's the one, here's the Nimitz video, and this is the video. I showed it back already in October. This thing has been around, as I'll point out, since 2007. And it was, as Eric Davis pointed out, because of course the controversy started on the internet, that this video was already on a company, a TV production company called Vision Unlimited in Great Britain. And Eric Davis stated that his belief was that somebody from the Nimitz who collected the videos leaked that video or sent that video to the German production company. The question is, why would you put it on a German production company site when you could have put it on an American site? You could have put it on any site. Why would you put it on a site where they're actually doing 2D and 3D production, where it might look like they may have hoaxed it? And that may have been, that's where you get into this whole thing where you take the information, you cover it with disinformation, and you release it. That perhaps the reason that they released it, because the reason that they used for putting it on this German site was that it was more secure than an American site, which Isaac Coy was one of the people who investigated this right from 2007, said this didn't make any sense to him, it doesn't make any sense to me either. And what it may be is that you put it there because you want people to have this sort of doubt that maybe they produced it, maybe it was a hoax, and you put it out there. And so it was put up there. The other key thing was that the Nimitz thing happened in 2004, and if this Navy guy who was gathering all the video and the radar data and was putting it on a CD or a DVD apparently, if he had it, why did he wait until 2007 to put it on this German site? Why was there a 3-year delay? 2007, of course, is a significant year. That's when the program started, the Black Money program to study UFOs, and that's when Bob Bigelow got involved in this whole thing. So it may have something to do with what's going on now, that this may have been in the works for many, many years. The Navy person, this is where Eric Davis said on Linda Howe's show that he's the guy that had done it. This supposed reason that it was put there was more secure than an American site. This is the name of the person who put it up. The German people say they really don't know who this person was that loaded it on there. And they had the German film students, again, was this thing, and it was posted under a banner called Fighter Jet UFO Footage, The Real Deal. And so it was up there, and then it was posted at above top secret, and then it was loaded to YouTube. Now, one of the stories that's going around is they got it off YouTube. They didn't get it off YouTube. It ended up on YouTube after this whole cycle of being on this German site. So this is what you got to remember, that this video has been around for quite a long time. And it's now gone. It's been taken off, and thanks to Giuliano, he told me where this video could be. It was in an archive somewhere, and I went and grabbed the video. So it's now gone. Now here's the video that is that was put on the German site, that was released, and now I'm going to play for you the Tom DeLonge release, and not the video, but just the audio, and you can tell that there's something different. Here's the video, 2007. Now, people are saying it's the same video. It's not the same video. The Tom Delonge one has this sound in the background. And the question is, does that mean it's a phony video? No, it doesn't mean it's a phony video. It just means that it may have been altered. And that's what I say. And I'll describe this on Saturday. When it comes to the Holloman Air Force Base story, the Holloman Air Force, they had the film. They had the film of these aliens that supposedly landed at Holloman Air Force Base, and at the last minute they pulled the film. And then they only allowed them to use 8 seconds of film, and that didn't get discovered for 20 years, that they had put 8 seconds of film. So what I'm saying, and this is just my opinion, that what you do is, this is the call of the high hurdle. How do you get it out into the public? Well, what you do is you make an alteration to it. It's not the same video. It is no longer classified. That was the story that was used with the MJ-12 document. That what you do is you take a real document, you make alterations to it, and you put it out. So you can say, this is a hoax, this is not real, this is not the real thing, and yet you release the information. So you're releasing the information, and you're controlling the speed of the release. Now, one of the other things that Eric Davis pointed out in this Nimitz video, 2004, is that there basically was a shoot-down order, that they had tried to make communication with this thing, and they didn't make it. They went through various radio channels. It didn't respond. Then they tried to do some actions with the plane to get its attention. They tried to get one of the planes in behind, and that they were given an order to try to shoot it down. And Eric said that they didn't have any munitions on the aircraft, but that's why there was this lock-on, that they tried to lock onto it. And so the whole idea that we're maybe possibly tried to shoot this thing down in 2004 almost goes back, and I played this clip a number of times. This is Frank Edwards talking about the UFO over the White House in 1952, and nothing's really changed. We're still trying to shoot things down. So here's Frank Edwards talking about the shoot down order. And Frank Edwards was probably one of the biggest broadcasters, radio broadcasters of the 1950s. Apparently had 10 million listeners. He was a big time name, and he was also into UFOs. This was a lecture that he gave in Detroit in 1956.
Well, actually, what this booklet does, it discusses a great many of these sightings around Washington, D.C., particularly those of mid-July 1952, when about a dozen of the things came over. About a dozen of them came over one night. They were tracked by radar. They were seen visually. They followed the planes in, and according to the CAA's own booklet, the pilots got good looks at the things as they followed them in and out of the airport. Some of them hovered, some of them went around the Capitol building, some went over the monument and the White House, and over the deep freeze, and circled all around there. They were seen plainly. There was no question about them being there. And as a matter of fact, the officials were so concerned about it that on the following morning they issued a shoot 'em down order. Why didn't they shoot them down the first night? They didn't shoot them down because the jets couldn't catch them, and they've never been able to catch one yet. The jets couldn't catch them. The next night they showed up. The jets didn't go up after them. They didn't go up with their shoot 'em down order for the simple reason that Albert Einstein and others of comparable standing heard about the shoot 'em down order, because the story was on the front pages all over the world. They heard about this shoot 'em down order, and they personally got in touch with the little man in the White House, and I know what Mr. Einstein told him. He said, "Mr. President, anyone who can cross millions of miles of space will be able to take care of himself after he gets there. Don't start something you can't finish." That was one time that Give 'em Hell Harry decided it would be better not to give him any hell.
Now, this is my personal opinion, because this has been brought up with this.
Well, actually, what this booklet does
is the idea that these beings may be evil guys, that they're threats, and Stephen Greer and other people have stated this is a false flag, and that this is going to be sort of war, and in a way that is got some validity to it, because some people have said, well, they were arguing with me and say, well, we can get some technology that tells us who the good guys and who the bad guys are, and it's like, no, you can't do that, because you just dress up like the bad guys and bring in the ships that look like the good guys, and you can't. It's always going to be this shoot 'em down order. So when it comes to evil aliens, I've always said I really don't believe there are any evil aliens, and I basically, and this is my personal opinion, is I say that we have met the enemy and he is us. We are the problem, not these ships. They did not do anything, and again, if the story is true, we tried to shoot this thing down. Nothing has really changed. Now, this is an important story that people sort of know about this, but people don't realize the significance of this. And this goes back again to the first slide. Are they disclosing? Are they covering up? Or are they doing something in between? When this story broke in the New York Times, Washington Post, Politico, a reporter, the guy on the bottom right, Jordan Fabian, actually asked a question of the press secretary, Trump's press secretary, and said, does President Trump believe in UFOs, and is he going to refund the UFO investigation program? And Sarah Sanders said, I haven't talked to the president, I will go to the president, I will talk to the president, and I will circle back around and I will tell you. And nothing has happened. And this is the whole deal. If this was a disclosure, if this was for real, they would have come back and said, yes, the president knows about this. Yes, this is for real. And again, they play the same thing that they've played for 14 administrations since 1947. They played the thing, the president's an idiot, the president isn't briefed, the president doesn't know what's going on, because you can't. If the president talks about this thing, it's game over. Then you're disclosing. Then it starts to get out of control. So they're using this back door, half this, half that. If this was a disclosure, the president would have answered that question. They didn't answer the question. They're staying away from it because that's part of the thing, is you don't want the actual confirmation. You don't want to actually bring the video and actually confirm this for real, drop the documents, get the president. If you want a disclosure, you bring the president out and talk about it. This is interesting. John Alexander did an interview. I just want to bring up one particular interesting thing that he brought out in there, is he visited my friend Chris Bledsoe, and he was asked by the host of podcast UFO, why did you go to Chris Bledsoe? Why would you go and talk to him? And what John said is, my sponsor set it up, which really made me think, a sponsor? And I've heard from one of the other people on the Tom Delonge team that used the word sponsor as well, as if there is something going on that we really don't know. But again, this is little things that mean something to me but don't mean anything to anybody else. John, however, is on the same page on the consciousness thing as I am, as Tom Delonge is, as Bigelow is, and I say it's the key. He is actually writing a chapter in the Free Foundation, is putting out a book, and John is writing chapter 21. He's not associated with Free, but he is writing this because he has actually nailed this thing. And he talks about contact modalities. And basically what he says is we need to undertake comparative research of all the contact with non-human intelligence in a unified approach and not via a stovepipe approach. And basically that's the whole thing, and I've talked about for years. It's called phenomenology. It's really not called UFOs. You've got to realize when you're dealing with this UFO issue that it has this consciousness aspect, and that you have to take it all as one thing and put it all together. You can't break it up as to hardware and consciousness and you know, near-death experience and all this sort of stuff. When you start taking a close look at this, all this stuff is combined. So I applaud John Alexander for this. This is exactly what I believe, that we have to stop all this parsing of all these different things and realize that we're talking about one phenomena coming in different aspects. The Scientology thing, I've mentioned this in the past, I'm just going to mention this for a second. This was the whole thing that Ron Pandolfi, who I will say is CIA. People can say whatever they want. I will put my reputation that he is CIA. He does have the keys. He is in control of the classified information. He may have been the guy who briefed the last 7 presidents. And when this thing came out, He stated it was a Scientology scam, the whole Tom Delonge thing, run by Hal Puthoff. And as I got into it, and I know some people around them and stuff, I found out that he was very serious about this thing, but I don't think he denies the data. It's just the fact that people are going to try to make money on this. And so I brought this out, and it's sort of been confirmed over and over again. And yet, when you come down to this, you say, okay, so there's these opposing teams. They're going to expose to Tom DeLonge as just people out to make money. And then when I started to look, this is where, and this will be in a future update, I haven't really sorted all this together. Suddenly I see all people around Pandolfi meeting with people who are with Tom DeLonge. And it's like, well, if you're opposing, if you're saying this, well, why are you having these meetings? I haven't outlined which ones they were, but very, very strange, where again, this is where I came right at the beginning. I said, the more I look at this, the more it looks like a lot of this stuff is just smoke and mirrors, and it's all one operation. It's one operation that's carefully planned, and it's authorized by the President of the United States. Here's Ron. This is posted just a couple of days ago. Ron says disclosure comes in small bites. That is exactly what's happening. It's very little bits and pieces. It's not, if you want to disclose, you're going to just put it out, stand up the Secretary of Defense and put out the videos. You don't need to play all these backdoor games and buy books and stuff like that. This is an interesting thing. When Pandolfi made the claim about the Scientology thing, suddenly this appeared on Julian Assange's WikiLeaks page. Basically, Pandolfi's version of the story, that this is a Scientology scam, this whole Tom DeLonge thing, and that Dan Smith said it was actually Ron who wrote it and sent it to Julian Assange, who posted it. The interesting thing about this, there's been a development on this, that page has now been taken down by WikiLeaks. It's no longer up there, and yet there's stuff where he says the Democrats are trying to get the UFO vote. So he's not out of the UFO thing, he's just pulled the Scientology thing. So whatever that means, it's been pulled off WikiLeaks. I've been watching closely the Pandolfi thing, and at times it gives me a great headache. There was this is in the last week or so. There was looked like it all fallen apart. There was no script, and Dan actually posted, "We've fallen into a deep and crowded rabbit hole. We're trying to find the exits, and we don't want folks to be trampled in a stampede for the exits." And even I have a number of people who are helping me with this. We all headed for the exits too. He said, "Oh, this has been a total waste of time. Right? We're not going to do this." And now they revived it again, and it appears we may have misread it, that this operation is still going. In fact, they're the ones that are putting out the story that there's going to be this meeting next week, and we've been told some of the people who are going to show up at this meeting, where the meeting is going to take place, and we'll see what happens. But this is what this is like. It's not a clean-cut story. It's not disclosure. It's not somebody standing up and telling you what's going on. It's U.S. intelligence, U.S. counterintelligence. It's like a spy game, and it can really give you a headache because it's all cloaked. It's all smoke and mirrors, and a lot of the time you have no idea what's going on. As to the FOIA, and this again comes back to the first slide, are they disclosing? If they were disclosing, we would have had this by now. We would have confirmed all the stuff with the Nimitz, and yet what you have is you have a situation where all the FOIAs have come up blank. I had a reporter who, when this story broke on December 16th, I said to him, "Can you help me file an FOIA?" And he filed the FOIA, and he actually talked to a spokesman at the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense spokesman he talked to said, "We did not release anything." And from then I knew there was some sort of, it was this same game. It's the old thing, the story's true, and here comes the smoke and mirrors. And it's like, no, we didn't release anything. And now people are starting to realize, like, yeah, there really is nothing when you actually go for it. The FOIA stuff there's nothing there. You would, if this was all real and these videos were all released, you'd be able to grab all this stuff, but it's the same sort of thing. Eric Davis talked about this, and the idea that people weren't getting this material because John Greenwald, who is probably the top guy to file, hadn't gotten anything. And he basically stated here, we're looking for the chain of custody, and it's called the COC. The chain of custody is the document that the government produces for the New York Times, for the Washington Post, for Politico, for the general public to say this is a legitimate video. And this is called the high hurdle. How do you do this? How do you verify the fact that this is a real video? How does the government come out and do this without blowing up the ship or sinking the Titanic? Because once you make this absolute confirmation and everybody's got it, then the story sort of goes out of control. So what happened was Eric said the chain of custody remains classified to prevent tipping off foreign enemies on identities of intelligence personnel, their assigned offices, specific intelligence programs that were involved, and technology, contact, or origin, the data itself. So no, the chain of custody will likely never be revealed to protect highly classified sources. What that basically comes down to is taking people's word. There is a chain of custody, but you're never going to see it. And when you get that, it's the same thing. It's a slippery slope where things start to sort of fall apart. Now, I've been dealing with John Greenwald because he has filed. And the idea was that he hadn't used the right name to get his material and to the right office. And that he probably had sent it to DOD. It should have been the DIA. But the reporter that I was working with sent it to the DOD, and they transferred it to the DIA. Now, John Greenwald, in response to the fact that he had sent it to the wrong department, and that the reason he was not getting any material on his FOIs, and he's been filing for a long time. He didn't just start filing on December 16th. He actually was filing in October when they first announced this program existed, this threat identification program in the Defense Department. He started filing. This was his response to the fact that he just is not using the right terms and whatever. He said, I have filed approximately 8,000 FOIA requests over 21 years, not including appeals, MDRs, and follow-ups. When I filed this one, that is being referenced back in October of last year, Mr. Elizondo did not announce the complete name of the program. But my experience and opinion, that didn't matter in the eyes of an FOIA. Why? Well, and then he basically says that he filed and he didn't use the exact title, but it was derived from the testimony of Mr. Elizondo. So he said, Mr. Elizondo talked about this. He quoted the Huffington Post newspaper, and he said in past FOIAs, this is all they need. You don't really have to have it specific. You just have to be able to reference where this was talked about. And so he says the testimony of Mr. Elizondo should be more than enough. The whole point of this thing is that he got nothing. Eric Davis said, the DIA FOIA office will reject Greenwald's request under statutory exemptions because we don't want our enemies knowing the specific details. So here you have this situation where we're going to file FOIAs and nothing is going to be obtained. This is John Greenwald stating that actually they were using two different names. Leslie Kean was calling it one thing, and the Secretary of Defense was calling it, other people were calling it something else. So one was aviation, one was aerospace. So they didn't even have the terms correct. Robert Powell has been filing for over a year. He had this story, as I knew about this story, he had this story before. He was filing FOIAs last year. He's filed 13 FOIAs. And as far as I know, from the last interview I heard him give, basically nothing. He even talked about one incident where it was a very basic deck, files from the deck of one of the ships, which would be very easy material to get. The FOIA guy said, we don't have that, and that's very mysterious. So basically, even though he's gotten some sort of confirmation that the incident is real from his FOIAs, he's really not got any material. So here we go. It's the same thing as the Holloman Air Force Base story or all this other stuff. It's the story is put out, but the high hurdle of actually getting an actual confirmation, getting a government document to verify, or getting hardware that's got a chain of custody, or getting a video that's got a chain of custody that everybody can see, is another thing. That's something that they have a problem. Like, how do you do this without sort of blowing up the place? Eric pointed this out, which is kind of interesting. There was a lot of controversy about the fact that Bob Bigelow was a friend of Senator Reid and that he had some inside track. And Eric pointed out the DIA posted a BAA, a broad area announcement for the AATIP program on their website back in 2007 or 2008 to solicit contract proposal. Bigelow Aerospace submitted their proposal and won the contract, which basically means that anybody that says, oh, this was an unfair deal, didn't see the announcement, they could have bid for it as well. That this was actually posted by the DIA, it was done legally, and Bigelow bid legally for it, and there's no problem with him having the contract. Let's skip that. Now I want to just go in the chain of command. This is where I say, and I did an update on the whole thing on Barack Obama. I say a lot of this has to be authorized by the President of the United States. You cannot run this kind of thing. It is getting sanctioned by the President of the United States. They just don't want you to know. They want you to think the President's an idiot. This all started with Barack Obama. He talked a lot. I did a whole update on Barack Obama's involvement in UFOs. This is him giving awards at the Kennedy Center, where he gives an award to Shirley MacLaine, where during the award he references Area 51. Just after documents were released that showed Area 51 on a map, and then Area 51 documents were released, and then Barack Obama comes out and talks about it. And he makes the statement, I'm probably the first president ever to talk about Area 51 in the public. And there's a story, and I had this in the update, that once the president talks openly about something, that basically declassifies it. That green lights it. That says, okay, the operation's good, we're good to go. And so I say that the president is giving authorization of this. And later on, from whether you can believe it or not, Dan Smith stated that Ron had told him that Trump had also authorized, he wasn't interested, but he had authorized this program to continue after Barack Obama. So I'm making the claim that this is all authorized. It's coming from the president. There are no rogue groups that are running around with videos and stuff that people don't know what they're doing. People like Pandolfi will shut them down. You cannot run around the country with classified material and release it. They will stop you. So I believe this is all being authorized. It all started in February of 2015. Steve Bassett got this impression, so did I. As soon as I saw this tweet, I knew something was up. And that was John Podesta on the day he leaves the Obama administration, which is something you should always keep in mind. When he left the administration, when Elizondo left, when Steve Justice left, they leave their job and then they start the UFO thing. So they leave the day that Podesta leaves the White House under Barack Obama as an advisor to the president. He said, my biggest failure of 2014 was not again securing the disclosure of the UFO files. So he basically is saying, I talked to the president about this, I couldn't get him released, and he actually copies Marie Dowd, who had done an article in 1997 talking about the Roswell news release about the crash test dummies, and she said, this is the stupidest thing I ever heard. This actually proves that this thing actually happened. And so I believe that this is the first sort of flare that showed the game is on. John Podesta makes this tweet. Then in September of 2015, as the person who's running Hillary Clinton's campaign, which is a $1 billion campaign, which you would say, well, you don't want to bring up UFOs because you're going to destroy the campaign. In the middle of the campaign, he talks to Lena Dunham, and he says to Lena, good interview, next time ask her about the aliens. So he wants the alien issue brought up. And for sure, when you see those kind of tweets, and John Podesta doesn't tweet very often, you know something's in the game. They want people to talk about UFOs. They want this subject brought up. Something's in the works. And it's all happening behind the scenes, but something's in the works. November, Hillary is actually waiting for a question. Now, Hillary never brought up the subject of UFOs. Hillary only answered 3 questions. She never brought up the subject, which was, I think, part of the plan. But she's waiting for the question from the talk show, and she doesn't get this from Jimmy Kimmel, and she's very upset. According to the WikiLeaks email, she goes back, she said, I practiced this answer, and I didn't get asked the question. So she's waiting for this question to bring it up. And so you can tell there's a disclosure thing going on. People, very high-level people, are doing things, and it's making it look like it's accidental, that she just accidentally gets asked a question. Nothing's accidental. This is all happening behind the scenes. The key element that I say that turned this whole thing around, people ask me because I knew something really changed around this time. The end of 2015, 2016. In fact, Dan Smith, I think, refers to everything taking off in January of 2016. And this is an interview that's given by Barack Obama to GQ magazine in November of 2015. And in that one, he's asked the question, have you ever said, give me the JFK assassination files. I want to read them. Give me all the secret stuff. And Barack Obama answers. And remember, he doesn't have to answer this. He says, I got to tell you, it's a little disappointing. People always ask me about Roswell and the aliens and UFOs, and it turns out the stuff that's going on that's top secret isn't nearly as exciting as you would expect. In this day and age, it's not as top secret as you think. So he basically says there are top secret files on UFOs, but they're not as exciting as you think. And the reporter basically falls asleep or has a stroke and says, would you like to be a Supreme Court justice? He basically does not follow up on this. So Barack basically green-lights this thing. I am convinced he was green-lighting this thing. He's saying, okay, it's okay to go. And again, this is from an article that was written on this subject of when presidents talk about classified material. Many experts agree that once the president speaks publicly about something, the information is effectively declassified. So Barack is basically opening this thing up and saying, okay, you can go. And that's when the Tom DeLonge thing starts. That's when it all starts to move. All this operation takes place. All these people, no matter what people want to think, it wasn't Tom DeLonge set them up. They were set up. They set up Tom DeLonge. He was at a barbecue. He was invited to that barbecue at Skunk Works, and then he was met the president. The president sent him to talk to two intelligence people in Washington. Those people sent him to NASA. They sent him to the West Coast, to NASA on the West Coast. He met a general, and all these people joined up. No different than Bill Moore in 1980. Same story. Bill Moore, same thing. He had these contacts. And I'll talk a bit about this, how the Bill Moore thing took place on Saturday, how that thing is exactly the same operation, exactly how he was set up. All these people joined him, said, we want to get this material. And so they used Tom DeLonge. He's provided the platform with which they are going to get this UFO material into the public without sinking the Titanic. And again, I say this is a book by Stephen King, and he got a lot of his books in lucid dreams, and he has an expression which applies absolutely to this entire story for 70 years, this gradual disclosure thing, SSDD, same shit, different day. It's the same thing. They're just doing the same thing. They just got different players, different characters, and they're gradually telling you what's going on. That's what's going on. On Saturday, I'll talk about Bob Emenegger, a good friend of mine, and his was the first, and his was very clear, very clearly approached by the U.S. government, very clearly allowed to go wherever he wanted, was allowed to walk into the Pentagon without signing in, was given all sorts of film, and actually still has a top secret film. James Fox knows about this. Angela Joyner and I tried to recover this film. They still have a top secret film that they were given in the 1970s. So they were given a lot of material, and so it's the same operation being run again today. And I think this is my last slide. I'm going to spend some time on Bob Bigelow because I think he's, when you hear his interviews from the last 10 years, you realize, wow, this guy is a real smart guy. He's honestly trying to get to the bottom of this thing. He made some moves, got control of this whole thing. And he was asked by George Knapp in an interview in 2013. George said to him, do you think there's an operation in Hollywood? Do you think there's an operation where they're putting stuff into Hollywood or they're gradually moving this stuff out? And here's what Bob said. I think that there is sub rosa, an effective sympathy towards this in other areas and other circles that might be government connected, that may feel the time is right for more honest delivery of the truth connected to the existence of the phenomena. And the thing you got to remember, and I'll end with this, is you got to realize these people are in a difficult position. They have to get it out, but you've got to do it legally. You can't produce classified material. You don't want the story to get out of control, and this is how they're doing it. So I'll leave it at that and send it back to Alan.
Okay, thank you, Grant. So there's a lot of questions that that you still have to cover because you've gotten people up to speed, but like maybe you could. Are
you still there? You're breaking up, Alan.
Looking forward to it because, oh, we're just watching the pieces.
Ellen, we can't really hear you. You're breaking up.
Oh, sorry. I'm just saying that. Wait. Let me just see if one second.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. I can hear you.
Okay. No, I was just saying it'd be great on Saturday if you can cover everything that's coming forward. Like, how would you second guess their next moves? Because things are going to unfold. Things are moving fast, and I think you have a handle on all the pieces. So that's what I would love to see you move forward with on Saturday. How do you think it's going to come down?
Okay, I can mention that. We really don't know. We're guessing. I mean, I was told that this is when this happened. This is just to prick the bubble. This is just to get people interested. You have not seen anything yet. In fact, if you go to Gary Nolan, who is the geneticist from Stanford University, who's on the Tom Delonge team, you will see he says, you ain't seen nothing yet. Everybody's saying the same thing. That as I pointed out, there are these 24 videos. There are all these 100-page reports, stuff like that. There's hardware. There's all this kind of stuff that they're going to drop. Now, again, it's like the slow disclosure. They're going to do little bits and pieces. Tom Delonge has 6 books. You have to read the 6 books. You got to do he's got documentaries and stuff. So I've heard one big move, and I really don't want to sort of out them, but I've heard one big move, which is a move that's going to happen on TV that will be as big as the New York Times story if it turns out to be true. And I'm told it's going to happen right away. But as you know, with the Tom Delonge operation, last year there was all these things. This was all supposed to happen in 2016 in December, and nothing happened. There was a whole year delay. So that's what people have to realize, that this is behind the scenes. You have all these strings to pull. These guys have to set all this stuff up. It's not as easy these things. So there may be some delays again. I'm not sure, but I'm told there's a lot of stuff coming out that they're going to hammer this stuff home.
It's the most exciting time, I think, in history, and I'm glad you're on top of it. I look forward to what you have to say on Saturday. That's a whole weekend of disclosure, January 20th and 21st. Go to portal to ascension.org. You can sign up there. Lots of people on there. Grant's going to be talking at the end of Saturday. We're going to start off with Nick Pope. Grant, thanks so much for that presentation. It's always adds another little piece to the puzzle that everyone's trying to put together. So I look forward to your talk on Saturday. Thank you.
Thanks. It helps. And if anybody's got a question, they can sort of pose it for Saturday. We'll do some questions Saturday.
All right. Great. I did just want to say that Hal Pulloff was a Scientologist when he worked for SRI with the remote viewing program, if you knew that.
Well, Ron Pandolfi's saying everybody except for Mellon is a Scientologist. I don't believe that.
No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. But,
we'll get into it.
If you get into the Scientology thing, I mean, these people figured something out about consciousness. I mean, just because they had, some money thing going on the side didn't mean that the Scientologists weren't onto something. Ingo Swann was a Scientologist, and all these, I think that's where they got remote viewing from, was from Scientologists that figured this out before the remote viewers did.
Could be. Okay, let's get into all of this on Saturday. Thank you, Grant. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Okay.